Okay, should only take about 15 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. You're all clicked in.
How's the atmosphere?
Looks good.
All right, here we go.
Steve, you all right down there? Steve!
Joel's noticed his coworker Steve is in serious trouble, so he's acting on his first impulse. He's going into that tank to help his friend. Is this the right move? Wanting to help a coworker who's in trouble is natural, but Steve has collapsed in this confined space, and Joel doesn't know why. By following Steve into the space, he's setting himself up to be a second victim. Permit-required confined spaces, also known as permit spaces, can be dangerous and aren't limited to tanks like the one Joel is about to enter. They include spaces in a wide variety of workplaces, spaces like manholes, rail cars, storage bins, bag houses, pits, mixing tanks, sewers, pipelines, holding tanks, boilers, and vats. There's one common element these spaces share. They can be extremely dangerous. So dangerous that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, has regulations in place to protect workers like you.
Confined spaces can have dangerous atmospheres, physical constraints that can cause engulfment on the entrant, other physical hazards, slips, trips, and falls, and other dangers such as that.
I think confined spaces are overlooked, typically because confined spaces within a building don't change over time. Sometimes the things inside the confined space may change, but there's a false sense of security with a lot of confined space entries because an employee may have been at a work site for years and years and made this entry over and over and over. So they just have a false sense of security, and they may miss steps or they may skip steps just due to repetition.
A confined space is potentially dangerous. There's no work in the workplace that is ever worth your life. So follow your company's policies, make sure that all your equipment is working appropriately, and count on your coworkers that are part of your confined space entry team.
What do the regulations mean by a confined space? A confined space is large enough for an employee to enter, has limited or restricted means of entry and exit, and is not designed for continuous occupancy. There's no doubt your work site contains confined spaces. Some of these spaces meet OSHA's definition of a permit-required confined space because they have one or more of the following characteristics. Contain or has the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere. Contain material with the potential to engulf an employee who enters it. They have inwardly converging walls or a downward sloping floor to a smaller cross-section that could asphyxiate or trap an employee. Or they contain any other recognized serious safety or health hazard. Among the most worrisome potential hazards in permit-required confined spaces are dangerous atmospheres. Hazards you can't see, but can cause serious injury or even take your life. Examples of atmospheric hazards include low oxygen levels, flammable gases, and toxic air contaminants. Low oxygen levels may be caused by not enough ventilation. Oxygen is also used up by rusting metal or rotting vegetation. Other gases, such as carbon monoxide from engine exhaust, can creep into the space and replace the oxygen in the air. An oxygen-deficient atmosphere can quickly kill you. The presence of flammable gases such as methane and hydrogen sulfide are extremely dangerous atmospheric hazards. A spark or flame can easily ignite a flammable atmosphere and can cause a catastrophic fire or explosion. For safe entry, combustible gases, vapors, or mists must not exceed 10% of the lower flammable limit as measured using a multi-gas monitor. Another atmospheric fire hazard in a confined space is combustible dust. If the dust obscures your vision so you can't clearly see at least 5 feet, consider the atmosphere in the space to be flammable. Too much oxygen can also be dangerous. Oxygen-rich atmospheres that have more than 23.5% oxygen in the air can make other materials burn hotter and much more quickly. Toxic air contaminants can be the result of welding or cutting, or from using solvents or other chemicals in the permit space. They can also be present due to rotting vegetation or engine exhaust. The presence of toxic air contaminants can impair an entrant's ability to self-rescue. Other potential dangers present in some confined spaces are engulfment hazards. Certain finely divided solids such as sand or gravel, plastic pellets, or even sugar can behave much like quicksand and engulf an unprotected person. The internal configuration, or the way a confined space is designed, may also present serious hazards. Spaces with converging walls, baffles, or downward sloping floors that taper to a smaller cross-section could trap an entrant, cause asphyxiation, and make rescue, especially self-rescue, difficult or impossible. Other hazards include mechanical hazards, such as unguarded fans or moving blades, energy sources, such as exposed electrical wiring, steam lines, or pneumatic energy, which can be dangerous, and extreme temperatures, either hot or cold, can prove hazardous to employees who must enter confined spaces. So, how do you know where the permit-required confined spaces are located at your worksite? For your protection as an entry team member and for the safety of all employees, your employer has identified and marked the entrance to these permit spaces with a highly visible warning sign that says, "Danger, permit required confined space, do not enter." For additional protection, the entrance to these spaces may also be barricaded or locked to prevent access by all unauthorized employees.
Having a good lockout-tagout program in place and making sure that all energy sources are isolated prior to making entry are probably the biggest precautions to take.
Let's review OSHA's confined spaces training requirements in more detail. Training is required for all affected employees, which includes the entry supervisor, attendant, and the authorized entrant, the person who actually enters the space to perform assigned work. Affected employees must be trained to have the appropriate understanding, skills, and knowledge to perform their job safely in a permit space.
Training is extremely important so that people understand the hazards that they're going to be facing prior to making entry in confined spaces.
It's imperative that you actually practice hands-on. You have to learn the basic knowledge, and that's done in a classroom or through adult learning, alternative learning technologies. But we must actually physically practice it to get it right.
OSHA's standard is also very specific regarding the training of rescue teams. For the safety of the entry team, a rescue team must be available in an emergency. Whether the rescue team is an on-site group of employees with specialized training or an outside agency, such as a local fire department, the rescue team must be aware of all potential hazards and have the proper training and equipment to perform a rescue in your workplace's confined spaces.
There are a lot of things that have to go along with that if you do not have an on-site rescue team. If you're using your fire department, you have to be in close communication with the fire department. They have to be trained. They have to have the equipment and the ability to perform a rescue in all of your confined spaces. And B, the communication part is of utmost importance, and that's typically where the break in the chain lies. If a fire department goes out on another call while you're making an entry in a confined space, there has to be a communication route so that the fire department can notify the company that they are no longer available for rescue.
All of the elements we've discussed so far must be present in your employer's permit-required confined spaces written program. As part of compliance, your employer must involve affected employees in the development of the plan and must make this written program available for your inspection and review. Your employer's written program goes into considerable detail regarding the classification of spaces you'll be entering, the hazards of those spaces, safe entry procedures, the equipment provided to protect you, and the rescue services that will respond to incidents. All of this information is developed and organized in order to protect you as an entry team member. Reviewing and understanding the written program is an important step in protecting yourself and your coworkers when working in permit-required confined spaces. Now, let's watch a trained entry team work together to safely enter a permit-required confined space. We'll call your attention to the specific responsibilities of each team member as they perform their duties. This team consists of 3 individuals: an authorized entrant, an attendant, and an entry supervisor. These 3 distinct roles must be present in every permit space entry, although the entry supervisor's role can be filled by the entrant or the attendant. The authorized entrant is the person who will enter the permit space to perform assigned work. He has received specific training on the hazards that may be present in the space and the appropriate use of personal protective equipment, or PPE, and any rescue equipment, such as a tripod, body harness, and a retrieval line to make a non-entry rescue possible. The entrant must stay alert to hazards and exit the space immediately if a potential danger or prohibited condition is encountered, or if the attendant gives an order to evacuate the space. The entrant should be especially alert to warning signs, such as dizziness, sleepiness, breathing difficulty, and confusion. The second member of the team is the attendant. The attendant is required to remain outside the permit space during the entry operation and focus on monitoring the entrant. She must be trained in the potential hazards of the permit space and must continually monitor the space for those hazards. She must also monitor for unsafe conditions that may develop outside the space. The attendant must also be trained to recognize the behavioral effects of the entrant's exposure to hazards, behaviors that are a red flag that something may be wrong. Examples of behaviors to be alert for include lack of coordination, drowsiness, slurred speech, confusion, and even non-response. If the entrant is showing signs of any of these behaviors, it is critical that the attendant order the entrant to exit the permit space immediately. Once the entrant is inside the permit space, the attendant must maintain communication with the entrant and be prepared to order him to leave the space if an unsafe condition develops. Furthermore, the attendant must be trained and prepared to perform non-entry rescues as specified by the employer's written program and be able to summon rescue services in emergency situations. Finally, the attendant must remain outside the permit space until entry operations are completed or until she is relieved by another trained attendant. The entry supervisor is the third member of the team. Like the authorized entrant and the attendant, the entry supervisor must know the hazards that may be faced during entry. The entry supervisor may also serve as an attendant or as an authorized entrant as long as he is trained and equipped for each role. The entry supervisor is also responsible for removing unauthorized entrants from the permit space. The entry supervisor is responsible for reviewing the entry permit and signing it to authorize entry. The entry permit includes important information about the permit space and serves as your instruction sheet for safe entry. It contains the name of the space to be entered, the purpose of the entry, the date and authorized duration of the entry, the names of the authorized entrants, attendants, and entry supervisor, the hazards of the permit space to be entered, measures used to isolate the permit space and eliminate or control hazards, and any equipment used. It also lists the phone numbers for rescue services, along with instructions on how to call for rescue. The permit will also contain the results of testing done to ensure acceptable entry conditions. And if there are additional permits needed, such as a hot work permit for welding operations, these will be noted on the entry permit as well. The entry supervisor posts the permit at the entrance of the space, where it will remain until the entry operation is completed and the entrance is secured. If the work is canceled for any reason, the supervisor will indicate this on the permit. As a final step, the entry supervisor cancels the permit by signing it when the entry is completed.
Follow the process. The process is important, filling out the proper permit, and not just pencil whipping the permit, but going through the process and making sure all the steps are followed.
Now, let's take a look as this experienced team works together to safely enter the permit space. In this scenario, the team is doing a top entry confined space operation. The tripod and winch are in place, and a cable has been attached to the rescue harness the entrant will be wearing. In addition, all team members are wearing the proper PPE, and the entry supervisor has obtained the entry permit.
Looks like we're all set. We'll just check air quality.
To ensure safe entry conditions, the team tests the atmosphere using a multi-gas monitor. The space must first be tested for oxygen content, and the level must be between 19.5 and 23.5% to be considered safe for entry. The supervisor records the oxygen level reading on the permit. Next, the team tests for flammable gases and vapors, then for toxic atmospheres. These results are recorded on the permit as well. The testing must take place in a specific order. First for oxygen level, then for flammables, and finally for a toxic atmosphere. Most employers use a multi-gas meter that gives readings for oxygen, flammable gases, and toxic atmospheres at the same time. Because poor ventilation in a permit space can cause the air inside to form layers, with a heavier air contaminant settling near the bottom, readings are taken near the top, middle, and bottom of the space. It's important to allow enough time at each level to let the instrument provide an accurate reading. Did you notice the entrant is wearing a rescue retrieval harness connected by a line to a hoist system? This will facilitate a non-entry rescue should something go wrong. We'll say more about rescue later.
Before I can sign this permit, I need to confirm that we use the proper procedures and that we're wearing the proper PPE. I've notified emergency services. They know we're going in today and they are on call. All the emergency phone numbers are here on the permit. Okay, Julie, you're the acting supervisor for the rest of this job.
All right. Thanks. You all ready?
Yes.
Entry is considered to have taken place as soon as any part of the authorized entrance body has broken the plane of the opening into the space. Note the team has arranged barriers so unauthorized people don't